The audacity of his words hit me like a physical strike. I had spent the entire morning pulling a little girl back from the brink of death, fighting to stabilize her fragile heart, while my own heart was breaking at the thought of missing my vows. Before I could even process his callousness, Evelyn stepped out from the front row. She adjusted her designer pearl necklace and gave me that familiar, condescending smirk she had perfected over the 3 years we dated. "I always warned Marcus about you," she announced, ensuring her voice carried to every wealthy aunt and uncle in the room. "I told my son that an orphan raised by distant relatives on the wrong side of town would never possess the pedigree required to sit at our table. You always thought that medical degree made you superior to our family legacy. But look at you now, looking like a common laborer. Chloe is the right choice for a man of his stature." Chloe leaned into Marcus, resting her head on his shoulder. She lifted her hand to admire the ring, the very ring I had spent months helping to design. "Thank you for paying the courthouse venue fees, by the way," Chloe chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It was so generous of you to sponsor our special day." My mind raced, connecting the dark dots of their cruelty. They had planned this entire spectacle. When the hospital called me in for the mass casualty emergency, Marcus had promised he would handle the judge and postpone the ceremony. Instead, he called his stepsister and used my paid reservation to marry her. They thought I would crumble. They expected me to burst into tears, to beg for an explanation, to create a hysterical scene that would only confirm the narrative of Evelyn about my lack of class. I felt the familiar sting of rejection, a feeling I had known since childhood, but I refused to let them see me bleed. I squared my shoulders, zipped my coat over my scrubs, and prepared to walk out of that toxic room with my dignity fully intact. I turned, facing the heavy wooden doors at the back of the hall, but the exit was blocked. A tall man stood in the shadows. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit. His presence commanded the room instantly. The collective breath of the gallery hitched as he stepped into the light. I recognized him immediately. Julian Sterling, the billionaire venture capitalist whose 6-year-old daughter was currently recovering in the intensive care unit, thanks to the pediatric cardiothoracic team I lead. What I did not expect was the look of absolute terror that suddenly washed over the face of my supposed groom. Marcus dropped the hand of his new bride as if it had caught fire. All the arrogant bravado he displayed just moments ago vanished, replaced by a pathetic, desperate pallor. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking loudly in the silent courthouse, "I did not realize you were attending. We have that pitch meeting scheduled for next Tuesday regarding the $10 million seed round." Julian did not look at Marcus. His piercing gray eyes remained fixed on me, observing my blood-stained scrubs and the stoic mask I forced onto my face. Then slowly he turned his gaze to the altar. "I came here today because I make it a habit to know exactly who I am getting into bed with financially," Julian said, his voice a low, lethal baritone that carried perfectly across the room. "A man who begs my firm for a $10 million investment to launch a healthcare startup needs to possess unquestionable integrity. I came to witness your character, Marcus, and you have certainly shown it to me." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Evelyn, never one to miss an opportunity to kiss the ring of actual wealth, practically shoved Chloe aside to step down from the altar. "Mr. Sterling," Evelyn began, her voice dripping with that manufactured Southern charm she used on church elders and country club presidents, "you simply must understand the context. This woman here," she gestured vaguely in my direction, "has been nothing but a distraction to my son. She is a workaholic who neglects her duties. Marcus is a visionary. He merely corrected a terrible mistake today by marrying someone of proper breeding." Julian looked at Evelyn with the kind of clinical detachment one might use when inspecting an insect. "Madam," he said coldly, "the woman you are pointing at just spent the last 12 hours standing over an operating table, saving the life of my only child. If this is what you consider a distraction, your son's visionary startup will be bankrupt before the end of the fiscal quarter. My firm does not invest in cowards, Marcus. And we certainly do not invest in men who lack the spine to look their own partners in the eye. Marcus took a step forward, his hands raised in a pleading gesture. Please, Mr. Sterling, you have to separate my personal life from the business model. The algorithm we built is revolutionary. Do not let a personal misunderstanding ruin a $10 million partnership. Julian simply shook his head. The deal is dead, Marcus. I suggest you find another firm to fund your delusions. Watching the blood drain completely from the face of my former fiancé was intoxicating. The suffocating humiliation that had threatened to crush me just 3 minutes ago completely evaporated. My mother-in-law was speechless. Chloe stood at the altar looking like a deer caught in headlights, clutching her bouquet with trembling hands. I realized in that exact moment that they had absolutely no power over me. They were small, greedy people playing dress-up, and I was the one who had been funding their production. I reached into the pocket of my coat and pulled out my wallet. I unzipped the side compartment and retrieved the folded, heavy cardstock of my latest premium credit card statement. I walked deliberately toward the altar, my footsteps steady and deliberate. Chloe shrank back slightly as I approached, holding up her left hand, as if the diamond ring could somehow protect her. I stopped right in front of her. "That is a beautiful cut, Chloe," I said, keeping my tone completely conversational. 2.5 carats crushed ice oval set in a hidden halo platinum band. I should know. I spent 4 weeks going back and forth with the jeweler in Buckhead to get the setting absolutely perfect. Chloe blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Marcus bought this for me," she protested weakly. I laughed, a sharp, genuine sound that echoed off the high ceilings. Marcus has not had a positive bank balance since he quit his pharmaceutical rep job to play tech founder. I corrected her, making sure my voice carried to the back row where his aunts and uncles sat. I tossed the folded statement onto the polished wood of the judge's bench right in front of her. "Enjoy the ring, Chloe. Just make sure your new husband pays the $15,000 balance I put it on by this Friday. If the funds are not cleared by 5 p.m., I am calling American Express and reporting it as stolen property. I am sure the police will love to hear about how you acquired it." Chloe let out a strangled gasp, looking frantically at Marcus for reassurance. Marcus just stared at the floor, totally paralyzed by the public exposure of his financial impotence. Evelyn looked like she was about to suffer a stroke right there in her designer church suit. I did not wait for their pathetic excuses. I turned my back on the altar and walked toward the exit. Julian Sterling stepped aside, extending his arm toward the heavy double doors. "Allow me to escort you out, Dr. Washington," Julian offered smoothly. "My driver is waiting out front. I believe a woman of your caliber should not be waiting on a taxi." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I replied, accepting his gesture. I walked out of the courthouse and stepped into the crisp Atlanta air, leaving the stifling toxicity of the Marcus family behind me forever. A sleek black Rolls-Royce was idling at the curb. The driver immediately opened the rear door for me. As I slid into the luxurious leather interior, I glanced back toward the courthouse steps. Through the glass doors, I could see the absolute chaos I had left in my wake. Marcus was arguing frantically with Chloe, who was pulling at the ring on her finger, but it was Evelyn who caught my attention. She had stormed out of the gallery and was pacing furiously in the lobby. Her face was contorted with pure rage as she aggressively dialed her cell phone, her eyes locked onto the departing Rolls-Royce. She was calling someone, rallying her troops, already plotting how to make me pay for embarrassing her family in front of the city's most ruthless billionaire. Let her try. The leather seats of the Rolls-Royce provided a quiet sanctuary as the driver navigated the bustling Atlanta streets toward Buckhead. I used the 20-minute ride to compose myself. I wiped the dried blood from my hands using a sterile wipe from my medical bag and took deep, measured breaths. I needed to pack my essential documents and clothes before Marcus and his toxic family could regroup. I expected to walk into an empty, quiet house. I expected to have at least an hour to gather the life I had built over the last 4 years. I was wrong. As the luxury car turned onto my private tree-lined driveway, my stomach plummeted. My belongings were scattered across the manicured front lawn like garbage. Designer heels I had bought after my first successful solo surgery were tossed into the rhododendron bushes. My custom medical textbooks, some filled with irreplaceable handwritten notes, were dumped carelessly onto the wet grass. The driver offered to wait or call for assistance, but I politely declined. I needed to handle this myself. I stepped out of the vehicle, and the heavy car door clicked shut behind me. The Rolls-Royce glided away, leaving me standing at the edge of my own driveway. Laughter drifted down from the wraparound porch. Evelyn and Chloe were sitting in my custom wicker chairs. They held crystal flutes filled with my expensive vintage champagne. Chloe was holding her left hand up to the afternoon sun, admiring the diamond ring I had practically paid for. Evelyn looked completely in her element. She wore a smug, victorious grin, looking down at me as if I were a pest that had finally been exterminated from her immaculate garden. "Look who decided to show up!" Evelyn called out, her voice dripping with venomous glee. "I told the movers not to be too gentle with your trash. I figured since you are so comfortable looking like a common laborer, you would not mind digging through the dirt to find your cheap clothes." I walked slowly up the stone pathway, my eyes scanning the destruction. They had not just thrown my things out. They had intentionally tried to humiliate me in front of the entire gated community. Several neighbors were already peeking through their expensive window treatments, eager for the neighborhood drama. I stopped at the bottom of the porch stairs. I did not yell. I did not scream. I looked directly at Evelyn and then at Chloe. "You have exactly 5 minutes to pick up every single item you threw on my lawn and place it neatly inside the foyer," I said, my voice steady and cold. "If any of those books are damaged, I will be sending you the invoice for their immediate replacement." Evelyn threw her head back and laughed loudly. It was a harsh, grating sound that shattered the quiet suburban afternoon. "Your lawn," she mocked, standing up and walking to the edge of the porch to look down at me. "You really are delusional, Haley. You actually think playing doctor gives you ownership of a multi-million-dollar property. You think your measly salary could ever afford a house in this zip code? This is my son's house. Marcus owns this property, and since Chloe is now his legal wife, she is the lady of this manor. You are nothing but a squatter who has officially overstayed her welcome." Chloe stood up next to her new mother-in-law, taking a slow sip of her champagne. "You should really listen to her." Chloe chimed in, adopting a patronizing tone that made my blood boil. "Marcus told me everything. He told me how you tried to force your name onto the deed. But Evelyn protected him. She is the one who paid the $200,000 down payment to secure this estate for him. This house belongs to the Marcus family legacy. You were just lucky they let you sleep here while you were useful." I stared at the two women. The sheer audacity of their ignorance was staggering. Evelyn had twisted the narrative so completely that she actually believed her own lies. She had convinced Marcus, and clearly Chloe, that she was the financial savior of their family. She had paraded around Atlanta high society, acting like a wealthy matriarch, funding her lifestyle with money she had absolutely no right to claim as her own. "You mean the $200,000 check Evelyn wrote 2 years ago?" I asked, taking one deliberate step up the stairs. The check she claimed came from her late husband's secret inheritance. Evelyn puffed out her chest, adjusting her designer cardigan with a self-satisfied smirk. "Exactly. I provided the foundation for my son to build his life. I protected his assets from gold diggers like you. Now take your trash and get off my son's property before we have you arrested for trespassing." I did not back down. I took another step up the stairs, my gaze fixed firmly on Evelyn. "You really are a master of illusion, Evelyn. But illusions do not hold up when the bank records are pulled. You did not have a secret inheritance. You did not have a dime to your name. That $200,000 came from a joint investment account that I foolishly allowed you to manage because Marcus begged me to trust you. I funded that account. I earned every penny of it working back-to-back shifts at the hospital while you sat at the country club." Evelyn turned an ugly shade of red. "How dare you accuse me of theft?" she shrieked, her Southern Belle facade completely crumbling in an instant. "You are a liar. Marcus is the sole owner of this property. His name is on the paperwork. I saw it myself." Chloe pulled her cell phone from her designer purse. her fingers tapping aggressively on the screen. "I am not listening to this crazy woman anymore," Chloe announced, her voice trembling slightly. "I am calling the police. You are trespassing on private property, Haley. When the cops get here, they are going to drag you away in handcuffs. Let us see how your precious hospital board reacts when their star surgeon gets arrested for trespassing and harassment." Evelyn smirked, raising her champagne glass in a mock toast. "Call them Chloe. Tell them an unstable, violent woman is threatening the rightful homeowners. They will put her exactly where she belongs." I watched Chloe prepare to dial the numbers. I watched Evelyn revel in her perceived victory. They thought they held all the cards in this interaction. They thought the police would arrive, take one look at the black woman in messy scrubs, and immediately side with the weeping white bride and the wealthy-looking older woman standing on the porch. They relied heavily on a system they thought they could easily manipulate to their advantage. They assumed my silence over the years was weakness, a lack of power or understanding of how the world truly worked. "Put your phone away, Chloe," I said calmly, crossing my arms over my chest. I reached into my own pocket and pulled out my device. "I will save you the trouble of making up a story." I dialed 911 myself. The operator answered almost immediately. "Yes," I said, keeping my eyes locked on Evelyn and Chloe. "My name is Dr. Haley Washington. I need officers dispatched to my residence in Buckhead immediately. I have 2 hostile intruders on my property. They have vandalized my personal belongings and are refusing to vacate the premises. Yes, I am the homeowner. Please send a unit to escort them off my property safely before this escalates further." I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Evelyn and Chloe stared at me, their confident smirks slowly melting into masks of genuine confusion and rising panic. "You are bluffing," Evelyn sneered, though her voice lacked its previous booming volume. "Marcus showed me the deed. His name is printed right on it in black and white. Marcus showed you a piece of paper he desperately wanted you to see." I corrected her, walking up the final steps until I was standing directly in front of them on the porch. "He showed you what he needed to show you to stroke your massive ego and keep you paying for his lifestyle. But Marcus does not own this house. Marcus does not even own the car he drives to work every day. When those officers pull up to this driveway, we are going to see exactly whose name is on the authentic state-certified deed." The silence on the porch was deafening. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees and the distant, undeniable wail of police sirens approaching our gated community. The sirens grew louder, echoing through the manicured streets, signaling the absolute end of the manufactured reality Evelyn and Marcus had built. 2 black and white Atlanta police cruisers pulled into my driveway, their blue and red lights flashing aggressively against the perfectly manicured hedges of my estate. Neighbors who had been eagerly peeking through their expensive window blinds were now stepping out onto their grand front porches, wrapping their cashmere cardigans tight, hungry for the scandal unfolding on my lawn. Just as the uniformed officers stepped out of their vehicles, a silver Porsche Cayenne squealed to a halt right behind the cruisers. Marcus jumped out of the driver's seat, his face pale and slick with panicked sweat. He rushed up the wet lawn, completely ignoring my scattered belongings, and positioned himself protectively in front of his mother and his new bride. "Officers, thank goodness you are here," Evelyn cried out suddenly, clutching her chest and adopting the frail, trembling voice of a terrified elderly woman. "This woman is a disgruntled ex-fiancée. She broke onto our private property and is threatening my family. We want her removed immediately and charged with trespassing. She is completely out of control." The lead officer, a tall, stern-looking man with a completely unimpressed expression, held up his hand to pause her theatrics. He turned his attention to me. "Ma'am, is this your residence?" "You handled that beautifully, Haley," he said, sitting in the leather armchair across from me. "You did not flinch once." I took a slow sip of the bourbon, letting the warmth steady my nerves. "I am getting used to dealing with their desperation," I replied. On the massive flat-screen television mounted on the wall, the local news channel was playing. The broadcast had cut back to the live press conference downtown. Marcus was sweating under the bright media lights, pointing frantically at a digital chart. He was talking in circles about how his new medical artificial intelligence software was going to revolutionize patient diagnostics. Chloe stood right behind him, clapping enthusiastically, playing her role perfectly. Marcus looked directly into the news cameras, issuing a thinly veiled plea, disguised as a boast, practically begging Julian to finalize the $10 million seed round. Julian scoffed, shaking his head at the screen. "He is like a drowning man trying to sell water," Julian remarked. "He actually thinks this public stunt will force my firm to fund him." I stared at the television screen, watching Marcus point to lines of code on his presentation slide. A slow, sharp smile spread across my face. I set my bourbon glass down on the mahogany side table and leaned forward, my eyes locked on the specific diagnostic algorithms Marcus was claiming as his own invention. "He is not just a drowning man, Julian," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "He is a thief." Julian raised an eyebrow, his interest instantly piqued. "Excuse me?" I pointed at the screen. "I built the foundational logic for that diagnostic tool during my residency," I explained. "I let Marcus review my proprietary research notes 2 years ago when he said he wanted to understand my field better. He did not invent a single line of that code. He is selling you a stolen product." Julian leaned forward, a predatory gleam entering his gray eyes. "What is the secret behind the AI of Marcus Sterling?" "The secret behind his software is that he did not write a single line of it," I replied, my voice steady and cold, keeping my gaze locked on the television screen where Marcus was still gesturing wildly to the press. During my second year of residency, I spent my late-night shifts in the pediatric intensive care unit. I was exhausted by how often we missed subtle, early warning signs of post-operative heart failure in infants. The human eye can only track so many fluctuating variables at once. So I started building an algorithm. I fed 3 years of anonymized patient data into a predictive model designed to alert nurses to microscopic changes in vital signs hours before a critical event occurred. Julian leaned back in his leather chair, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "You built a predictive medical artificial intelligence in your spare time. I am a pediatric heart surgeon, Julian. Math and anatomy are my entire world," I said, turning to face him. Marcus saw the prototype running on my laptop one evening. He had just bankrupted his second tech startup and was desperate for a lifeline. He offered to fix a hardware issue on my computer. Instead, he cloned my hard drive. He stole the entire back-end architecture of my program, slapped a sleek user interface on it, and called it his own revolutionary invention. The temperature in the executive office seemed to drop 10 degrees. Julian set his glass down with a sharp, heavy thud. His jaw tightened, and the calculating billionaire venture capitalist instantly replaced the grateful father. "I will have my legal team draft the lawsuit right now," Julian stated, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "We will file for an emergency injunction. I will have the federal authorities seize his servers before he finishes that press conference. We can bury him under so much litigation he will not see daylight for a decade." "No," I said firmly. Julian paused, looking at me with genuine surprise. "He just tried to orchestrate the destruction of your medical license, Haley. He is actively pitching stolen intellectual property to the press. Why on earth would we wait? Because right now Marcus is just a desperate man telling lies to a camera," I explained, leaning forward and resting my hands on his mahogany desk. "If you sue him today, he becomes a martyr. He will spin a narrative that a massive, greedy venture capital firm is trying to crush a brilliant, independent tech founder. My ex-mother-in-law will rally her influential church friends and turn it into a public relations nightmare. We are not going to stop him from climbing, Julian. I want you to help him climb. I want you to let him reach the absolute highest peak possible before we cut the rope." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Julian's face. He rested his elbows on the desk, matching my intensity. "You want me to bring him in? You want me to offer him the term sheet?" "Exactly," I nodded. "Let him commit wire fraud. Let him commit investor fraud. Marcus only has an outdated, clunky prototype. What he does not know is that 3 months before he stole my hard drive, I legally registered the source code and the patent under Apex Medical Solutions, a subsidiary shell company owned entirely by my blind trust. He has absolutely no legal right to the intellectual property." If you offer him a formal investment contract, he will be forced to sign legally binding documents swearing he is the sole creator and owner of the code. Julian laughed a low, dark sound that echoed in the quiet office. I respect your ruthlessness, Dr. Washington. We will give him enough rope to hang himself and his entire family. I will have my executive team invite him to my headquarters tomorrow for a high-stakes investment meeting. Across town, inside a luxury hotel suite rented entirely on maxed-out credit cards, Marcus paced the thick carpet with his phone clutched in his sweaty hand. Chloe sat on the edge of the plush king-sized bed, anxiously peeling the polish off her manicured nails. Her designer wedding dress was ruined, and the reality of their homelessness was rapidly setting in. Suddenly, the phone chimed with a high-priority email alert. Marcus stopped pacing. He stared at the screen, his eyes widening in absolute disbelief. He let out a triumphant, echoing shout, pumping his fist into the air. "We got it!" Marcus cheered, running over and grabbing Chloe by the shoulders. "Julian Sterling's executive team just emailed me directly. They want to rush the funding. They are inviting me to a private closed-door meeting tomorrow afternoon to sign the final term sheet for the $10 million seed round. I told you my press conference would force his hand." Chloe shrieked with delight, throwing her arms around his neck. "We are going to be rich again," she squealed. "I knew you would fix this. What about Haley? Did her hospital board kick her out yet?" Marcus smirked, his chest puffing out with sheer arrogance. "Oh, she is completely finished. By now she is probably packing up her little locker and crying in her car. She thought she could humiliate us and get away with it. But I am about to be the CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech company, and she is just an unemployed, disgraced doctor. We won Chloe. We took everything from her." They celebrated their imaginary victory entirely unaware of the devastating legal trap closing rapidly around them. Back in the hospital suite, Julian was already drafting the preliminary contract parameters on his secure tablet. He turned the screen toward me, tapping a specific paragraph buried deep within the dense legal jargon. "Standard investment contracts include an indemnification clause," Julian explained, his gray eyes flashing with predatory anticipation. "It requires the founder to swear they own the intellectual property free and clear. But I am adding a very specific personalized addendum just for Marcus. By signing this document and accepting the initial transfer of funds, Marcus will explicitly waive his corporate liability veil. He will be acting as a personal guarantor." I read over the complex legal text, my heart pounding with cold satisfaction. "He is arrogant enough to sign it without reading the fine print," I said. "He is too desperate for the cash to let his lawyers review it properly." Julian nodded, locking the tablet screen. "Oh, he will sign it. But I have included one final devastating condition regarding asset forfeiture if the intellectual property claims are proven fraudulent." I looked at Julian, waiting for the final piece of the puzzle. What is the fatal catch? If Marcus signs this contract and the intellectual property claim is proven fraudulent, his corporate liability protection dissolves instantly. Julian explained, his voice chillingly calm as he tapped the glowing screen of his tablet. He will owe the Sterling Foundation the entire $10 million personally, along with severe punitive damages. Corporate bankruptcy will not save him from this. He will be paying me back for the rest of his natural life. I smiled, raising my bourbon glass to toast the brilliant, devastating trap. It was the perfect execution of corporate warfare. Marcus was so blinded by his own arrogance and desperation that he would eagerly sign his own financial death warrant just to get his hands on the initial seed money. But while my professional battle was locked and loaded, my personal battle with his mother was far from over. 2 days later, a crisp Sunday morning dawned over Atlanta. While Marcus was busy reviewing investment documents in Julian's downtown high-rise, his mother was launching a desperate, calculated offensive on her home turf. Evelyn belonged to one of the most exclusive, wealthy megachurches in the city. It was a sprawling sanctuary of glass, steel, and polished stone, where social status was aggressively measured in charitable donations and front-row seating. I knew exactly what she would do. Evelyn needed to control the narrative before the truth about her criminal embezzlement and her humiliating eviction became public knowledge in her elite social circles. I parked my car and walked into the massive, packed auditorium just as Pastor Thomas handed the microphone to Evelyn for the morning testimony. The giant overhead screens broadcast her face to thousands of attentive congregants. She was dressed in demure, sorrowful gray, clutching a lace handkerchief and dabbing at her perfectly dry eyes. It has been a week of profound spiritual trials for my family. Evelyn began, her voice quivering with expertly manufactured grief. We have been targeted by an unstable, deeply troubled young woman. My former future daughter-in-law Haley has suffered a terrible mental break. Out of bitter, obsessive jealousy over my son Marcus, finding true love with his beautiful new wife Chloe. Haley lashed out violently. She forced us out of the home my son provided for her and has been spreading vicious lies to ruin his burgeoning medical career. We ask for your prayers during this dark time of persecution. A sympathetic murmur rippled through the massive congregation. Elderly women shook their heads in pity, and wealthy businessmen murmured their support. I did not wait for the collective prayer to begin. I pushed open the heavy oak doors at the back of the sanctuary and walked straight down the center aisle. I wore a sharp, tailored navy suit, my posture perfectly straight, my heels clicking rhythmically against the polished marble floor. I did not yell. I did not look angry. I looked exactly like a woman who held all the cards. The sympathetic murmurs died instantly as thousands of heads turned to watch my approach. The sea of congregants parted slightly as I walked down the long aisle. Up on the brilliantly lit stage, Evelyn froze mid-sob. The microphone dropped slightly from her trembling hand as the color completely drained from her heavily powdered face. Marcus had assured her I was a broken, defeated woman hiding in shame. I looked anything but defeated. Pastor Thomas stepped forward, raising a hand in a gesture of peace, clearly unsure of how to handle a live domestic dispute interrupting his highly choreographed service. Haley, Evelyn hissed, forgetting her microphone was still live and broadcasting her venomous tone across the massive speakers. You have absolutely no right to be here. Security will remove you immediately. I ignored her completely. I walked directly past Evelyn, not giving her a single glance, and stopped right in front of Pastor Thomas. I reached into my leather tote bag and pulled out a thick, heavy manila folder. I held it out to him with a calm, steady hand. Pastor Thomas, I said, projecting my voice clearly so it carried to the front rows and echoed slightly in the massive space. For the past 3 years, Evelyn has been celebrated in this congregation as one of your most generous and devout benefactors. She has enjoyed the prestige of your platinum donor circle, sitting in the best seats, and enjoying the social power that comes with funding your new youth center wing. Evelyn lunged forward, trying to snatch the folder from my hands, but a quick step back kept it out of her reach. Pastor Thomas instinctively took the heavy file, looking down at it with deep confusion. I am here to clear my name of the slander Evelyn just broadcast to your congregation. I continued, turning slightly, so my voice reached the wider audience. And I am here to inform you that every single tithe, every charitable donation, and every Platinum Circle pledge Evelyn has made over the last 36 months was funded entirely by stolen money. A collective synchronized gasp erupted from the thousands of people sitting in the pews. The absolute silence that followed was deafening. You could hear a pin drop in the massive auditorium. Evelyn embezzled over $400,000 from my personal surgical accounts. While she acted as my financial manager, I announced my words, slicing through the heavy air like a scalpel. The bank statements, the fraudulent routing numbers, and the official police report I filed yesterday are all inside that folder. She did not give to this church out of the goodness of her heart or her spiritual devotion. She bought her social status using the money I earned saving the lives of children. Evelyn staggered backward as if she had been physically struck. The congregation erupted into chaotic, shocked whispers. Dozens of wealthy socialites who had previously hung on Evelyn's every word were now staring at her with blatant disgust and horror. Her entire social foundation was crumbling in real time. I kept my eyes locked on Pastor Thomas. He slowly opened the manila folder, his eyes scanning the irrefutable bank logs, the highlighted unauthorized transfers, and the official police insignia stamped on the criminal report. The ethical and public relations nightmare of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen funds washed over his pale face. What will the pastor do? Pastor Thomas stared at the police report, the blood draining from his face. The horrific realization that his magnificent new youth center was built on a foundation of grand larceny hit him like a physical blow. He signaled sharply to the audio technician in the back of the sanctuary to immediately cut all microphones. He closed the manila folder, looked down at Evelyn with absolute disgust, and signaled for the senior church ushers to approach the altar. He announced to the stunned, whispering congregation that the church would immediately cooperate with law enforcement and initiate a full financial audit to return every single stolen cent to its rightful owner. Evelyn was escorted down the central aisle by two imposing ushers. She wept uncontrollably, her mascara running down her face in dark streaks. The wealthy socialites who had once adored her and hung on her every word now turned their backs in silent, unified condemnation. I turned and walked out the heavy oak doors into the bright Atlanta sunlight, leaving the ruins of her fake empire behind me. While Evelyn was suffering the total humiliating collapse of her social life, her new daughter-in-law was completely oblivious to the incoming disaster. Chloe was riding an incredible high. Marcus had returned to their luxury hotel suite the previous evening, with a triumphant shout waving the email invitation from Julian Sterling. He had convinced Chloe that the $10 million investment was a guaranteed reality, a done deal, just waiting for a final signature at the upcoming meeting. Intoxicated by the promise of unlimited wealth and desperate to solidify her new status, Chloe decided she needed a wardrobe that reflected her imminent position as the wife of a Silicon Valley millionaire. She headed straight for Phipps Plaza, the most exclusive and aggressively expensive shopping center in Atlanta. Marcus had handed her his black corporate credit card that morning with a strange, sweaty smile, silently praying the venture capital funds would miraculously clear before she could do too much damage. Marcus was completely broke. He had maxed out his personal credit lines just paying for their luxury hotel suite and the tailored suit he wore to his fraudulent press conference. He was hiding the devastating reality of his financial ruin from Chloe, desperately hoping to string her along until the sterling money hit his accounts. Inside the gleaming marble-floored interior of an elite French boutique, Chloe was performing for the staff. She strutted past the glass display cases, treating the sales associates like her personal servants. She demanded they fetch her sparkling water and bring out different sizes of shoes she had absolutely no intention of actually buying. She wanted to feel powerful. I happened to be in the exact same boutique. After the grueling week of hospital board drama and legal maneuvering, I had decided to treat myself to something beautiful. I was standing near the fitting rooms, admiring a stunning custom-tailored emerald silk evening gown hanging on a velvet display rack. Chloe spotted me instantly, her eyes lit up with malicious glee. She saw the perfect opportunity to assert her new dominance and humiliate the woman she believed Marcus had completely defeated. She strutted across the boutique, her heels clicking loudly against the marble floor, intentionally drawing the attention of the sales associates and the other wealthy patrons browsing nearby. Window shopping. Haley, Chloe asked, her voice dripping with artificial sugary pity. I suppose you have to find something cheap for your new downgraded lifestyle. I heard the hospital board suspended you. It must be so embarrassing to lose your career and your house in the exact same week. I did not flinch. I kept my voice perfectly calm and steady, refusing to give her the emotional reaction she was so desperately seeking. My career is perfectly intact, Chloe, I replied, turning to look at her with a polite smile. And my house is currently undergoing a deep cleaning to remove the stench of your fake wedding. Chloe sneered, her face flushing with sudden anger. She turned abruptly to the boutique manager, a stern, impeccably dressed woman who was watching the exchange with professional distaste. Wrap this green dress up immediately, Chloe demanded, pointing a manicured finger at the exact silk gown I had been admiring. I will take it, and I want the matching diamond clutch from the front display window. The manager looked at me silently, asking for permission. I simply stepped back and gestured for her to proceed. I wanted to see exactly how this was going to play out. The manager carried the garments to the pristine glass checkout counter. The total came to just over $14,000. Chloe did not even blink. She reached into her purse with an arrogant flourish, pulled out the heavy corporate card Marcus had given her, and slammed it onto the glass counter. The manager swiped the card through the terminal. The machine emitted a sharp, unpleasant beep. Declined. Chloe laughed a high, nervous sound that echoed in the quiet boutique. "There must be a glitch with your system," she said, her smile faltering slightly as she looked around. "Try it again. It is a corporate executive account." The manager ran the card a second time. The machine beeped again. Declined. Insufficient funds. The other patrons in the boutique had stopped pretending to browse. They were openly staring now, whispering behind their hands. Chloe's face turned a violent, blotchy red. She frantically dug through her purse, pulling out a personal credit card and shoving it toward the manager. "Just use this one." Chloe snapped, her voice rising in panic. The manager swiped the personal card. Declined. Chloe pulled out a third card, her hands physically shaking. Declined. Every single line of credit Marcus possessed was completely maxed out. He was financially radioactive. The boutique manager placed the cards back on the counter, offering Chloe a look of absolute freezing pity. "I am sorry, madam," the manager said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "All of your payment methods have been rejected by the bank. I'm going to have to ask you to step aside so I can assist paying customers." I stepped forward, my expression completely serene. I reached into my bag and pulled out my heavy metal bank card. "I will take the emerald gown," I told the manager, handing her the card. "And please ring up those diamond earrings in the display case as well." The manager processed my card. It was approved instantly. Chloe stood frozen in the center of the boutique, her arrogant facade entirely shattered. She looked utterly pathetic, stripped of her fake wealth in front of Atlanta's elite. She grabbed her declined credit cards and sprinted out of the store, nearly tripping over her own heels in her desperate rush to escape the humiliation. As Chloe sped back to their luxury hotel in a cheap rideshare, a dark, terrible suspicion began to take root in her mind. Marcus had promised her a $10 million empire. He swore he was a wealthy tech genius. So why were all of his accounts bouncing at a clothing store? She practically kicked the hotel room door open. The suite was quiet. The sound of running water echoed from the master bathroom. Marcus was in the shower. His briefcase, the one he guarded obsessively, was sitting unlocked on the edge of the bed. Chloe's hands shook as she reached for it. She pulled out his sleek laptop, opened the screen, and began digging directly into his private financial folders. She was looking for the truth about his wealth. What will she find? Chloe stared at the illuminated screen of Marcus's laptop, her perfectly manicured hands trembling uncontrollably. The banking portal did not display the vast, untouched millions he had promised her. Instead, it showed a terrifying sea of red numbers. She saw severely overdrawn credit accounts, past due notices from his previous failed startups, and a primary checking account holding exactly $47.12. Before she could process the magnitude of the lie, the bathroom door swung open. Marcus stepped out, a white towel wrapped around his waist, stopping dead in his tracks when he saw her holding his computer. He lunged across the luxury hotel room, violently snatching the laptop from her hands and slamming it shut. Chloe demanded an explanation, her voice shrill with rising panic and humiliation. Marcus immediately launched into a frantic, breathless lie, insisting the negative balances were merely temporary corporate restructuring maneuvers. He swore the accounts had to be completely drained to bypass massive tax penalties before the $10 million sterling investment cleared the following afternoon. Chloe wanted to scream, to pack her bags and run, but the promise of $10 million kept her rooted to the spot. She chose to cling to her greed rather than face the devastating reality of their ruin. Less than 24 hours later, Marcus sat in the sprawling penthouse office of Julian Sterling. The room was a monument to absolute financial power, encased in floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the sprawling Atlanta skyline. Marcus sank into the plush leather guest chair opposite Julian's massive mahogany desk, desperately trying to mask the cold sweat dampening his designer collar. He needed this money today. The luxury hotel manager was threatening to lock them out by the weekend Chloe was barely speaking to him after the catastrophic boutique disaster, and his mother Evelyn was currently hiding in a cheap short-term rental apartment facing a criminal audit from her former megachurch. Everything hinged entirely on the paperwork sitting between them. Julian sat with relaxed, effortless authority, radiating the calm demeanor of a predator playing with its food. He slid a thick, leather-bound portfolio across the polished wood desk. The contract was dense, filled with complex corporate litigation clauses, financial covenants, and venture capital terminology that Marcus lacked the education to fully understand. Julian casually flipped to the signature pages, offering Marcus a heavy, gold-plated fountain pen. Julian played the role of the eager visionary investor to perfection, lavishly praising the medical algorithm Marcus had stolen from me. Marcus preened under the billionaire's validation, his towering ego completely blinding him to the razor-sharp trap laid out in black and white ink. "We are ready to wire the initial seed capital of $10 million by the end of business today," Julian said, his voice smooth, authoritative, and dangerously calm. "But as my legal team outlined in the preliminary emails, we require a standard indemnification and collateral agreement before the funds are released into your corporate accounts. This is revolutionary medical technology, Marcus. We need absolute assurance that the intellectual property belongs entirely to you and that no previous employer or disgruntled ex-partner can claim ownership." Marcus nodded vigorously, practically vibrating with desperate anticipation. He reached for the gold pen, his overwhelming greed drowning out any shred of common sense or legal caution. Julian casually flipped back one page, tapping a specific heavily bolded paragraph with his index finger. "By signing this document," Julian explained, keeping his tone light and conversational, "you agree to officially waive your corporate liability protection regarding the software's source code. You are swearing under penalty of perjury that you are the sole architect, creator, and owner of the algorithm. If that ownership is ever contested or proven fraudulent in a court of law, you assume total, inescapable personal liability. This means you put up all your current and future marital assets as collateral. You and your wife will personally owe the Sterling Foundation the entire $10 million plus severe punitive damages." Marcus did not even hesitate. The terrifying fine print meant absolutely nothing to him. In his arrogant, deluded mind, I was just a disgraced doctor who had failed to secure a patent. He was thoroughly convinced I had no proof, no legal standing, and no power to challenge him in federal court. He viewed the devastating liability clause as a meaningless formality, a minor corporate hurdle standing between him and immense wealth. He grabbed the gold pen and began signing his name across the designated lines, pressing down so hard the dark ink bled through the thick paper. He signed away his future, his marital assets, and his financial freedom with absolute enthusiastic glee. He initialed the collateral agreements, legally binding himself and Chloe to a catastrophic debt he could never possibly repay once the fraud was inevitably exposed. He handed the pen back to Julian, flashing a wide, triumphant smile, fully believing he had just outsmarted a billionaire. Julian watched him sign the final page, a cold, predatory gleam settling in his eyes. He carefully closed the leather portfolio, securing the binding, and pulled it back across the desk. He stood up, towering over Marcus, and extended his hand. Marcus stood up, eagerly shaking Julian's hand with a desperate, sweaty grip. "Welcome to the Sterling portfolio," Julian said, a sharp, dangerous smile curving his lips. Marcus practically skipped out of the penthouse office, entirely oblivious to his own impending destruction. The moment the heavy glass doors clicked shut, Julian pulled his phone from his suit pocket. He opened our private encrypted message thread and typed a single decisive sentence. "The fish is on the hook." Meanwhile, as Julian and I prepared to detonate the legal charges that would vaporize Marcus's life, the consequences of my earlier actions were already arriving across town. Evelyn sat alone in her cramped temporary rental apartment, shivering in the quiet dark as she stared at her frozen bank accounts. Suddenly, the tense silence was shattered by 3 loud, aggressive knocks echoing against her front door. Evelyn jumped, her heart hammering against her ribs as she stared at the flimsy wood of the apartment door. She crept forward on her tiptoes, pressing her eye to the scratched peephole. A stern-looking man in a cheap gray suit stood in the dim hallway, clutching a thick stack of manila envelopes. A process server. Evelyn held her breath, pressing her back flat against the cheap drywall, refusing to make a single sound. She waited in agonizing silence for 10 long minutes until his heavy footsteps finally retreated down the hall. Hiding in the dark was not how Evelyn operated. She was a master manipulator, a woman who had spent decades bending reality to perfectly fit her own narrative. If she stayed locked in this pathetic rented apartment, the horrific rumors from the church incident would solidify into permanent, inescapable facts. She needed to strike back immediately. She needed her audience. She pulled her pristine white Chanel suit from its garment bag, clasped her grandmother's pearls around her neck, and applied her makeup with surgical precision. She was going to the exclusive Piedmont Country Club. She would sit down with the most influential gossips in Atlanta and spin a story so compelling that I would look like a deranged, jealous ex-fiancé having a severe psychotic break. 2 hours later, Evelyn strolled onto the sun-drenched patio of the elite club. She held her head high, offering serene, practiced smiles to the old money matriarchs lunching under the green and white striped umbrellas. She spotted her target immediately. A table of 4 highly connected women who sat on the boards of half the charities in the city. Evelyn glided over, pulling up a spare chair before they could even offer her one. She launched into her performance without missing a beat. "I am sure you heard about the horrible disruption at Sunday service." Evelyn began, her voice dripping with artificial sorrow as she pressed a manicured hand to her chest. "It is just an absolute tragedy. Marcus broke off his engagement with Haley, and the poor girl simply lost her grip on reality." She stormed into the sanctuary, screaming total nonsense about my bank accounts. "Pastor Thomas actually called me this morning to apologize for the scene. We are currently looking into getting her psychiatric help." The women exchanged uncertain glances, sipping their mimosas. Evelyn's delivery was flawless, her tone perfectly balanced between gentle pity and maternal distress. She was winning them back. She could see the doubt forming in their eyes, the willingness to believe that a young, bitter woman had simply snapped over a broken engagement. "It is a heavy burden," Evelyn continued, leaning forward to seal the lie. "But as a mother, I have to protect my son from her malicious slander. She is completely unhinged. She does not have a single shred of proof for these wild, desperate accusations." Right on cue, a server in a crisp white jacket approached their table, holding a polished silver platter. Evelyn smiled, reaching out gracefully, assuming it was a complimentary glass of champagne, sent over by the club manager to soothe her frayed nerves. The server did not hand her a glass. He placed the heavy silver platter directly in the center of the table, right next to the floral centerpiece. Sitting perfectly flat on the shining metal was a massive, intimidating stack of legal documents. "Evelyn Washington?" The server asked, his voice ringing out clearly across the quiet, affluent patio. Evelyn froze, her hands suspended in midair. "Yes," she whispered, the color draining rapidly from her face. The server dropped his polite customer service smile. "You have been served," he stated loudly. He turned on his heel and walked away, leaving the devastating payload sitting right in front of her. The thick packet of papers had been deliberately left unbound by my legal team. As the warm afternoon breeze swept across the patio, the top cover sheet fluttered open, exposing the highly detailed, aggressively bolded text underneath. It was not a subtle document. I had designed it to be as visually condemning as possible. The header screamed the words, "Civil lawsuit for embezzlement and grand larceny." Below that, printed in stark, unavoidable black ink, was the exact dollar amount she had stolen from my accounts: $400,000. But the true masterpiece of humiliation lay on the second page, which was currently facing the wealthy women sitting across from her. It was a blown-up high-resolution printout of Evelyn's personal bank routing numbers, sitting directly alongside the fraudulent transfer logs she had used to steal my money. Evelyn scrambled to cover the papers, her pristine facade shattering into absolute panic. She knocked over a mimosa glass in her frantic haste, sending orange juice and champagne spilling across the white linen tablecloth. "It is fake!" Evelyn stammered, her hands shaking so violently she could barely gather the scattered documents. "It is forged. Haley fabricated all of this to ruin me." But the women at the table were not looking at her with pity anymore. They were looking at the official court stamps, the verified bank logos, and the sheer volume of forensic financial evidence laid bare on the table. The illusion was dead. The country club matriarchs did not say a single word. They did not yell or accuse her. They executed a far more brutal punishment. They delivered total freezing social execution. One by one, they silently picked up their designer handbags. They stood up from their chairs, their faces blank masks of polite disgust, and walked away from the table. They abandoned Evelyn right in the middle of the crowded patio. Within seconds, the surrounding tables noticed the exodus. The whispers began immediately spreading like wildfire across the terrace. Evelyn was sitting alone in a puddle of spilled champagne, clutching a massive lawsuit detailing her criminal embezzlement. She was officially a pariah. Evelyn practically sprinted to the valet stand, hiding her face behind her large sunglasses. She threw herself into the back of her SUV, ordered the driver to leave immediately, and locked the doors. The moment the car sped out of the country club gates, she pulled her phone from her purse with trembling, frantic fingers. She hit speed dial, pressing the phone so hard to her ear it hurt. Marcus picked up on the second ring, his voice buzzing with manufactured, arrogant excitement. "Mom, you will not believe this. I just left Julian Sterling's office. I signed the paperwork. The 10 million is officially ours. We beat her." Evelyn let out a jagged, hyperventilating gasp. "Marcus, shut up and listen to me," she screamed, her voice cracking with sheer terror. "Haley just served me with a civil lawsuit right in the middle of the Piedmont Country Club. She has the bank records. She has everything. The whole city knows I am a thief. You have to wire me the money right now." There was a sudden heavy silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Marcus asked, his arrogant tone slipping into confusion. "I need the $10 million, Marcus," Evelyn shrieked, banging her fist against the leather seat. "I need you to transfer $500,000 to my accounts immediately. I have to hire the best defense attorney in Atlanta before Haley sends the police to arrest me. You just signed the deal. You have the money. Pay for my lawyers right now or I am going to prison." Evelyn waited, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs as she listened to her son breathing heavily on the other end of the line. She had staked her entire life, her reputation, and her freedom on Marcus's success. She had destroyed my life just to fund his ego. Now she was calling in the ultimate debt. Will Marcus agree to use his brand new, supposedly secured venture capital funds to save his mother from prison? Marcus gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. His mother's hysterical demands echoed through the receiver, shattering the fragile illusion of his imminent wealth. "I cannot wire you $500,000 right now, Mom," Marcus hissed, pacing the length of his luxury hotel suite like a caged animal. "The Sterling funds are sitting in escrow. The final compliance checks do not clear until Monday morning. If I suddenly request a massive cash withdrawal to pay criminal defense attorneys, Julian will freeze the entire deal. He will know something is wrong." "I am your mother," Evelyn shrieked, her voice shrill with terror. "I stole that money to fund your pathetic life. I paid for your servers. I paid for this suite. If Haley sends the police to arrest me, I swear to God, Marcus, I will tell them exactly where that money went. I will drag you down with me." Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Just give me 48 hours. Hide in the apartment, do not answer the door, and do not speak to anyone. As soon as Julian's check clears, I will hire the best defense team in Atlanta. Just wait." He ended the call violently, throwing his phone onto the plush king-sized bed. He buried his face in his hands, utterly consumed by panic. He had no idea Chloe was standing just inches away in the hallway. The heavy, sweet door cracked slightly open. Chloe stood frozen, the blood draining completely from her face. She had just fled the designer boutique in utter humiliation, after every single one of Marcus's credit cards had declined. She had rushed back to demand answers, fully prepared to throw a massive tantrum. Instead, she had just overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Subpoenas, embezzlement, frozen funds. The realization hit her with the force of a freight train. Marcus was not a brilliant tech visionary, he was a fraud, and his mother was a common thief. Chloe did not barge into the room. She did not scream or throw her declined credit cards at his head. Chloe was greedy, but she possessed a razor-sharp instinct for self-preservation. She silently pulled the door shut and backed away down the carpeted hallway. She needed an exit strategy, and she needed it immediately. The very next morning, while Marcus was desperately making phone calls to predatory bridge loan lenders to keep the hotel management from locking them out, Chloe slipped out of the suite under the guise of attending a bridal spa day. She did not go to the spa. She went straight to the sleek glass-paneled offices of a high-profile divorce attorney in Buckhead. Sitting in a pristine leather chair across from a senior partner, Chloe laid out the entire disaster. She explained that she had been fraudulently induced into the marriage, that her new husband was completely broke, and that her mother-in-law was facing imminent criminal charges for embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars. "I want an annulment based on fraud," Chloe demanded, her voice hard and calculating. "I will sign an affidavit throwing Evelyn under the bus. I will testify that they lied to me about their assets. Just get me out of this marriage before the financial fallout ruins my life." The attorney tapped his silver pen against his legal pad, his expression entirely unsympathetic. An annulment might be difficult to prove if you have no concrete documentation of his financial deception prior to the wedding. "Did you sign a prenuptial agreement?" "No," Chloe admitted, her stomach twisting. "Marcus said it was unromantic." "Then you have a serious problem," the attorney stated bluntly. "Without a prenup, you are legally bound to his financial liabilities incurred during the marriage. If he just signed a massive venture capital deal, you need to know exactly what kind of liability he assumed. Venture capitalists do not hand over $10 million without severe strings attached. You need to intercept those investment contracts and find out exactly what your husband put on the line." Chloe practically sprinted back to the hotel. She arrived just as a courier from Sterling Capital was stepping off the private elevator carrying a heavy sealed package addressed to Marcus Washington. "I am his wife. I will sign for that," Chloe said smoothly, offering her most charming smile and scribbling her name on the digital pad. She took the package into the empty suite, locked the door, and tore the thick cardboard open. Inside lay the final executed copies of the $10 million investment agreement. Chloe flipped frantically through the dense legal pages, her eyes scanning the complex corporate jargon until she reached the final addendum. Her breath hitched in her throat. The words seemed to burn themselves into her retinas. It was the personalized collateral agreement Julian had drafted. By signing the document, Marcus had explicitly waived his corporate liability veil. He had sworn under penalty of perjury that he owned the intellectual property free and clear. And right above Marcus's bold signature was the fatal clause stating that in the event the intellectual property was contested or proven fraudulent, Marcus assumed total personal liability for the entire $10 million plus punitive damages. All current and future marital assets were legally forfeited as collateral. Chloe dropped the documents onto the floor as if they had caught fire. She was legally married to Marcus. They shared assets. They shared liabilities. Marcus had not just signed his own financial death warrant, he had signed hers. Julian Sterling was going to vaporize Marcus, and Chloe was chained directly to the blast radius. If I proved the software was mine, Chloe would be spending the rest of her life paying off a $10 million debt to a ruthless billionaire. She had to cut a deal. She had to betray Marcus before the bomb detonated. 2 hours later, I was sitting at a quiet corner table in a cafe near the hospital, reviewing patient charts on my tablet. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and Chloe walked in. She was not wearing her usual arrogant smirk. Her designer sunglasses were pushed up into her hair, and her eyes were wide with genuine, unadulterated panic. She spotted me, marched straight over to my table, and sat down without asking for permission. "I know everything," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "I know Marcus stole the code from you. I know Evelyn embezzled the money. I know the entire tech company is a massive fraud." I slowly set my coffee cup down, keeping my expression perfectly neutral. And why are you telling me this, Chloe? Because I found the sterling contracts, she replied, leaning across the small table. Marcus signed away our marital assets as collateral. If you sue him for the intellectual property, Julian Sterling will take everything, and I will be ruined. I am offering you a deal, Haley. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small silver flash drive, placing it directly on the table between us. This is a complete copy of Marcus's hard drive, Chloe said, her eyes locked on mine. It has the original timestamps, the raw code, and the deleted files, proving he copied it directly from your computer. I will give you this drive. I will testify against Marcus in civil court. I will testify against Evelyn in criminal court. I will give you everything you need to lock them both in a cage. I looked at the silver flash drive glinting under the cafe lights, then up at Chloe's desperate, calculating face. And what exactly do you want in return for selling out your new husband? I asked. Immunity, Chloe demanded. You take the company, you take down Evelyn, and you take down Marcus. But you leave me completely out of the financial slaughter. You tell Julian Sterling to release me from the collateral liability. I stared at the woman who had happily destroyed my engagement, moved into my home, and flaunted stolen wealth in my face. Now backed into a corner, she was eagerly offering the heads of her new family on a silver platter. What will Haley negotiate? Absolutely nothing. I looked at the silver flash drive glinting under the cafe lights, then up at Chloe's desperate, calculating face. She pushed the small metal device a fraction of an inch closer to my coffee cup, her eyes wide with manufactured innocence. Haley, you have to listen to me, Chloe whispered, her voice trembling with a practiced theatrical fear. Marcus manipulated me. He lied to me from the very beginning. He told me he was this brilliant tech visionary, that he had built this incredible software all by himself. He and Evelyn completely brainwashed me with their fake wealth and their lies. I'm just a victim in all of this. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, letting a thick, heavy silence stretch between us. Chloe fidgeted her perfectly manicured nails, tapping nervously against the cheap laminate cafe table. She glanced around the quiet room, terrified someone might overhear her treason. We can make a deal, she pleaded, dropping her voice even lower. Woman to woman, Haley. We both got played by the exact same narcissistic monster. I can be your star witness. I can hand you the entire company on a silver platter. Just take the intellectual property back. Take Evelyn down for the embezzlement, but please do not destroy the corporate structure. If you just step in and take over as the rightful CEO, Julian Sterling keeps his investment in place, and I am freed from that horrific collateral agreement. It is a win for both of us, a woman-to-woman truce. A short, sharp laugh escaped my lips. I could not help it. The sheer breathtaking audacity of the woman sitting across from me was genuinely comical. A woman-to-woman truce, I repeated, uncrossing my arms and leaning forward, bringing my face inches from hers. The amusement vanished from my voice, replaced by freezing, absolute contempt. Let us review your definition of being a victim. Chloe, I said, keeping my tone deadly quiet. Were you a brainwashed victim when you stood on the courthouse steps, draped in designer clothes bought with my stolen money, and smirked at me while Marcus tore my life apart? Were you a helpless pawn when you happily moved into the house I paid for, slept in my bed, and watched Evelyn illegally evict me onto the street? Or perhaps you were heavily manipulated last week at Phipps Plaza when you tried to use Marcus's fraudulent credit cards to steal an evening gown right out from under me, just to publicly humiliate me one more time. Chloe's face flushed a deep, ugly mottled red. She opened her mouth to argue, to spin another desperate lie, but I held up a single finger, silencing her instantly. You did not come here today because you suddenly developed a moral compass, I stated, my eyes locking onto hers with unblinking intensity. You came here because the bank accounts bounced. You came here because you snooped through Marcus's briefcase and realized that the golden goose you married is actually a ticking financial time bomb. You are not sorry, Chloe. You are just terrified of being poor. I reached across the table and picked up the silver flash drive. Chloe let out a small, relieved sigh, clearly thinking I was accepting her terms. Instead, I dropped the drive directly into my half-empty cup of black coffee. It sank to the bottom with a quiet clink. Chloe gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Are you insane? That is the only proof you have. I do not need your stolen files, Chloe, I said, rising smoothly from my chair. I already have everything I need. Every single line of code, every fraudulent wire transfer, and every lie Marcus told Julian Sterling is already meticulously documented and sitting in a federal vault. The trap is already closed. You just happened to eagerly lock yourself inside it right before the timer ran out. I picked up my bag, looking down at her trembling, pale face one last time. You wanted my life, Chloe, I said, my voice echoing with absolute finality. Now you get to keep the debts that come with it. I walked out of the cafe, leaving her staring in sheer horror at the ruined flash drive sitting at the bottom of the cold coffee. While Chloe was spiraling into a severe panic attack, completely aware of the incoming devastation, Marcus and Evelyn were riding an artificial high of supreme arrogance. In their deluded minds, they had won. Marcus had the $10 million sterling signature, and Evelyn, despite the brutal humiliation of being served a subpoena at the country club, believed that Marcus's new wealth would easily buy off any legal threats I threw at her. Evelyn was desperate to repair her shattered social standing. She needed to prove to Atlanta high society that she was still royalty, and Marcus needed to publicly cement his status as a tech titan. They were so intoxicated by their own perceived genius that they decided to double down on their fake victory. Out of pure, unadulterated spite, Marcus and Evelyn announced a lavish $1 million charity gala. It was heavily promoted across the city as the official glittering launch party for Marcus's revolutionary medical AI software, seamlessly combined with a belated, grossly extravagant celebration of Marcus and Chloe's marital union. They rented out the grand ballroom of the Georgia Aquarium, promising a night of elite networking, unlimited champagne, and a keynote presentation that would change the face of modern medicine. They were financing the entire massive spectacle on credit, aggressively leveraging the promise of Julian Sterling's $10 million before the ink was even dry on the escrow release forms. Chloe was trapped, forced to smile for the event planners and try on expensive gowns, silently suffocating under the knowledge that they were marching toward a financial slaughterhouse. Marcus and Evelyn wanted the entire city to witness their triumph, but mostly they wanted to rub their untouchable power directly in my face. 2 days before the event, a courier arrived at the hospital reception desk, holding a thick, oversized envelope sealed with gold wax. It was delivered directly to my office. I sliced the heavy paper open. Inside was a VIP invitation to the Washington Medical Gala, printed on textured gold-foiled cardstock. A handwritten note fluttered out and landed on my desk. The note was penned in Evelyn's looping, arrogant handwriting. Haley, we thought you might want to see what real success looks like. Consider this a front-row seat to the empire you failed to build. Do try to dress appropriately for the occasion. Evelyn and Marcus. It was the ultimate taunt. A final arrogant slap in the face from a family that believed they had successfully buried me alive and stolen my entire world. They expected me to cower in shame, to hide in my apartment while they paraded my stolen life in front of Atlanta's elite. I read the note twice, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. I picked up my phone and dialed Julian Sterling's private number. He answered on the first ring. They just sent me an invitation to their $1 million launch party, I told him, tracing the embossed gold lettering of the VIP pass. Julian's deep, rumbling laugh echoed through the receiver. I received mine this morning. Marcus actually requested I give the introductory toast. It seems our fraudulent friends are very eager to host their own public execution. I am going to accept the invitation, I said, my voice hardening with absolute resolve. I want to be standing right in the center of the room when you pull the plug on the funding. Wear something stunning, Dr. Andrews, Julian replied, his tone laced with predatory anticipation. We have an empire to burn down. The Georgia Aquarium had been completely transformed into a temple of artificial success. Giant blue spotlights swept across the cavernous grand ballroom, casting a shimmering aquatic glow over Atlanta's wealthiest citizens. Waiters in sharp black tuxedos circulated through the crowd, balancing crystal trays of imported champagne and beluga caviar on silver platters. Behind the massive acrylic viewing wall, colossal whale sharks glided silently through the water, providing a breathtaking cinematic backdrop for the main stage. This was where Marcus was scheduled to deliver his triumphant keynote address. It was $1 million spectacle built entirely on a crumbling foundation of lies, stolen code, and staggering debt. Evelyn Washington stood at the top of the grand staircase overlooking the red carpet entrance, practically vibrating with narcissistic triumph. She wore a heavily beaded silver designer gown that caught the flash of every camera, laughing loudly with a local state senator and a network news anchor. In her mind, the humiliating scene at the country club was already ancient history. She was convinced that once Marcus's $10 million funding was publicly announced tonight, she would be completely untouchable. She turned away from the politicians and signaled the imposing head of private security standing by the velvet ropes. She shoved a crisp color-printed photograph of me directly into his chest. "If this woman attempts to step foot on the property, you are to physically remove her." Evelyn ordered, her voice loud enough for the nearby reporters to hear. "She is an unstable, obsessed former employee who has been harassing my family. I want her publicly turned away. Do not be gentle. She is a threat to the event." Beside Evelyn stood Chloe, wearing a forced, rigid smile that looked like a plastic mask glued to her face. While Evelyn was busy playing the victorious, untouchable matriarch, Chloe was internally suffocating. She knew the terrifying truth. She knew about the bounced credit cards, the empty bank accounts, and the lethal collateral agreement Marcus had signed. She had sat in the divorce attorney's office and realized she was chained to a sinking ship. She had desperately tried to betray her new husband to save herself, begging me for immunity in the hospital cafe, and I had flatly rejected her offer. Now she was trapped in a diamond necklace and a custom gown. She could not afford waiting for the torpedo to strike. A sleek black town car pulled up to the edge of the red carpet. I stepped out into the humid Atlanta night. The custom-tailored emerald silk evening gown I had purchased at Phipps Plaza fit me like a second skin, the rich fabric flowing elegantly as I walked. The matching diamond earrings caught the relentless glare of the paparazzi flashbulbs. I held my head high, moving with absolute, unshakable confidence toward the main entrance. The head of security immediately stepped forward, blocking the velvet rope with his massive frame. He glanced down at the photograph in his hand and then back up at me, his expression hardening into a hostile glare. "I am going to have to ask you to step back, ma'am," the guard stated, his voice booming over the chatter of the press line. "Your name is on a permanent restricted list. You are trespassing at a private corporate event. Leave the premises immediately before I have my men physically escort you away." Several local reporters turned their camera lenses toward the commotion. From the top of the stairs, Evelyn leaned over the balcony, her face splitting into a wide, malicious grin. She nudged Chloe, pointing down at me, eager to watch my public humiliation unfold exactly as she had orchestrated. I did not take a single step backward. I did not flinch, and I did not break eye contact with the guard. I simply waited. 30 seconds later, a massive custom black Maybach glided smoothly to a halt, directly in the designated VIP drop-off zone, right behind my town car. The heavy door swung open, and the chaotic shouting of the paparazzi abruptly transformed into a frenzy of excited screams. Julian Sterling stepped onto the pavement. He wore a razor-sharp, bespoke midnight blue tuxedo that radiated lethal authority. The billionaire venture capitalist ignored the flashing cameras and the shouting reporters, walking with predatory grace directly toward the velvet rope where I was standing. The security guard, recognizing the most powerful man in the city and the primary financial backer of the entire gala, instantly went rigid, stepping back to clear the path. Julian did not look at the guard. He stopped directly beside me and offered his arm with a charming, devastating smile. "My deepest apologies for keeping you waiting, Dr. Andrews," Julian said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the crowd. The traffic on Peachtree was abysmal tonight. I slipped my arm through his, matching his brilliant smile. "You are perfectly on time, Julian." The security guard stammered frantically, looking between his printed photograph, Julian, and the top of the stairs where Evelyn was standing. "Mr. Sterling, sir, I apologize, but I have strict orders from the Washington family. This woman is on the banned entry list." Julian slowly turned his head to look at the guard. The warmth vanished from his face, replaced by a freezing, terrifying emptiness that made the large man physically recoil. This woman is the co-architect of the medical technology we are allegedly celebrating tonight, Julian stated, his voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet register that somehow cut through all the background noise. She is my personal guest of honor. Are you absolutely certain you want to deny entry to the man paying the invoice for your entire security firm? The guard swallowed hard, the color draining from his face, as he instantly unhooked the velvet rope and stepped aside. No, sir, my apologies. Please go right ahead. Apologies. Julian guided me forward, and we stepped onto the red carpet together. The press completely abandoned Marcus's public relations team, surging forward to photograph the elusive billionaire walking arm in arm with the woman Marcus had publicly claimed was a disgruntled, deranged ex-girlfriend. Julian paused for the cameras, leaning in close to whisper in my ear, making sure every lens captured the undeniable intimacy and power of our alliance. Up on the balcony, the color completely drained from Evelyn's face. Her malicious grin collapsed into an expression of sheer, unadulterated horror. She gripped the marble railing so tightly, her knuckles turned white, her entire body shaking as she watched her worst nightmare materialize in front of the local news networks. Chloe stood beside her, looking like she might actually faint. She realized that her desperate attempt to avoid the blast radius had utterly failed. The billionaire who held her $10 million debt was allied directly with the woman she had relentlessly tormented. Deep inside the grand ballroom, hidden behind the massive velvet stage curtains, Marcus was sweating profusely. He tugged at his tight bow tie, his chest heaving as he paced back and forth, frantically trying to memorize the opening lines of his keynote presentation. He needed to project the image of a visionary genius to secure the final release of the sterling funds. He glanced up at the backstage preview monitors, which were broadcasting the live feed from the red carpet outside. Marcus froze. His heart slammed against his ribs, and the expensive tablet slipped from his trembling hands, clattering loudly onto the concrete floor. Staring back at him from the high-definition screen was his primary investor, the man who held the key to his entire fraudulent empire, proudly escorting me into the building. The trap had officially snapped shut. Marcus stared at the shattered digital screen of his tablet on the cold concrete floor. The high-definition image of Haley, walking arm in arm with Julian Sterling, burned into his retinas, sending a violent shockwave of pure terror straight through his chest. He frantically tried to rationalize what he had just witnessed. Julian was a ruthless, calculating businessman. Perhaps the billionaire was merely playing a cruel psychological power game. Perhaps Julian was using Haley for optics to secure favorable press. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, trying to regulate his hyperventilating breath. The $10 million contract was already signed, executed and legally binding. The ink was dry. Marcus convinced himself that he just needed to get through this keynote presentation, secure the ceremonial check in front of the press, and the money would legally be his. A stage manager in a black headset tapped him on the shoulder, signaling that it was his moment. Marcus took a deep, jagged breath, plastered his signature arrogant smirk onto his face, and walked out from behind the heavy velvet curtains. The grand ballroom erupted into deafening applause as Marcus stepped into the harsh, blinding glare of the center spotlight. He raised his hands, absorbing the adoration of Atlanta's elite, as if it were his divine birthright. Behind him, massive digital screens flashed with sleek, high-definition animations of the medical AI software, the exact, intricate software I had painstakingly coded during countless grueling night shifts at the hospital. Marcus grabbed the microphone, pacing the stage with the practiced, casual confidence of a seasoned Silicon Valley tech visionary. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Marcus began, his voice projecting a false, humble warmth that made my stomach churn from where I stood at the back of the room. 5 years ago, I had a vision. I looked at the broken, inefficient healthcare system, and I knew I had to build a radical solution. It took endless nights of coding, thousands of hours of relentless trial and error, and completely draining my personal savings, but I refused to give up. I poured my soul into this artificial intelligence because I knew it would save lives. I did not rely on handouts. I built this empire with my own 2 hands. Sitting dead center in the front row, Evelyn beamed, clapping louder and harder than anyone else in the room. She was practically vibrating with narcissistic pride, completely ignoring the glaring fact that her son's supposed personal savings were actually hundreds of thousands of dollars she had illegally embezzled from her corporate clients. Marcus paused, letting the heavy, adoring applause wash over him. He was deliberately and entirely erasing my existence from the history of his company. He did not mention the woman who had actually conceptualized the complex algorithms. He did not mention the woman whose bank accounts he had systematically drained to fund his fake lavish lifestyle. But I could not have reached this mountaintop completely alone. Marcus continued, his voice dropping into a performative, emotional whisper. He extended his hand toward the side of the stage. He called for his beautiful, supportive wife to join him. Chloe hesitated for a fraction of a second in the wings. I watched her from the shadows, knowing exactly how trapped and terrified Chloe felt in that exact moment. She knew the entire company was a massive, fragile house of cards. She knew about the lethal collateral agreement that tied her directly to Marcus's impending financial slaughter. But with the news cameras rolling and the entire city watching, she had no choice but to play her part. She forced a radiant, blindingly fake smile and glided up the stage stairs in her glittering designer gown. Marcus pulled Chloe into a deep, highly photographed embrace, kissing her passionately for the eager press. He turned back to the audience, keeping his arm wrapped tightly around her waist, as if she were a trophy. "Chloe is my sole inspiration," Marcus declared, looking adoringly into her panicked eyes. "When the late nights of coding seemed impossible, she was the one standing by my side, pushing me to achieve greatness. She is the heart and soul of this company." The crowd practically swooned, letting out a collective appreciative sigh at the picture-perfect, successful couple. Now Marcus said, his voice rising in triumphant anticipation. "It is time to officially launch the future of modern medicine. To help me inaugurate this software, I want to invite a man who saw the true value of my genius. The man who is backing this venture with a monumental $10 million investment. Please welcome the CEO of Sterling Capital, Mr. Julian Sterling." The ballroom exploded into a massive standing ovation as Julian detached himself from my side. He moved through the parting crowd with the lethal, unhurried grace of an apex predator. He climbed the stairs to the stage, smoothly buttoning his midnight blue tuxedo jacket, his expression entirely unreadable and utterly calm. Marcus practically lunged forward to shake Julian's hand, his eyes locked greedily onto the sleek digital display tablet Julian was carrying, which supposedly held the ceremonial $10 million wire transfer confirmation. Julian accepted the microphone from Marcus, but he did not hand over the tablet. He did not smile. He turned his back slightly to Marcus and Chloe, facing the sea of wealthy investors, reporters, and politicians. The room fell into an eager, expectant silence, waiting for the billionaire to validate the fraud standing behind him. Sterling Capital is built on a very simple, uncompromising philosophy. Julian's deep, authoritative voice echoed through the massive ballroom. We invest in absolute authenticity. We do not fund stolen ideas. We fund the brilliant, undeniable minds that actually create them. Tonight, we are here to celebrate a medical breakthrough of staggering proportions. However, there has been a significant fatal error in tonight's program regarding the true authorship of this technology. Marcus's arrogant smirk instantly vanished. A cold bead of sweat dripped down the side of his face. Evelyn abruptly stopped clapping her silver-beaded gown, catching the harsh stage lights as she nervously shifted in her front row seat, her face draining of all color. Chloe looked like she wanted the stage floor to open up and swallow her whole. "This revolutionary software was not built by the man standing behind me," Julian stated, his voice dropping to a freezing absolute register that commanded total terrified silence across the room. "It was conceptualized, coded, and perfected by a brilliant hospital physician who was fraudulently stripped of her own life's work. Sterling Capital does not invest in thieves, frauds, or embezzlers. We invest in visionaries. Therefore, it is my distinct honor to present this $10 million partnership to the actual founder, creator, and rightful CEO of Washington Medical AI. Julian extended his hand directly toward the back of the ballroom. Instantly, the heavy stage spotlights aggressively swiveled, cutting through the darkness to illuminate me standing tall in my emerald silk gown. Dr. Haley Washington. Julian commanded, his voice ringing with lethal, undeniable authority over the stunned crowd. Please join me on stage to claim exactly what belongs to you. Marcus stared at the shattered digital screen of his tablet on the cold concrete floor. His lungs burned as he gasped for air, panic paralyzing his limbs. He had no choice but to proceed. He pasted on a sickeningly fake smile, stepped out from behind the velvet curtains, and walked into the blinding stage lights. For 20 agonizing minutes, Marcus pitched my software to the elite crowd, claiming he had spent years coding it from scratch to save lives. He even pulled a trembling Chloe onto the stage, kissing her and calling her his sole inspiration. He completely wrote me out of the history of the product, claiming he funded the research with his own money. The crowd applauded wildly. Evelyn beamed from the front row. Then Julian Sterling approached the microphone to ostensibly present the $10 million check. But Julian did not hand Marcus the money. Instead, his voice echoed through the grand ballroom, freezing the applause instantly. He announced that the software was stolen and called the true architect to the stage. I stepped out of the shadows and walked into the harsh glare of the stage spotlights. The massive ballroom went instantly suffocatingly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Every camera lens pivoted away from Marcus and locked entirely onto me. I wore my emerald silk gown like armor, moving with a calm, predatory grace that made Marcus physically recoil. Chloe shrank back against the digital presentation screen, her face completely drained of blood. Down in the front row, Evelyn sat frozen in her silver-beaded dress, her jaw hanging slack in absolute disbelief. I did not walk empty-handed. Gripped firmly in my right hand was a thick stack of legal documents, each one stamped with the heavy, undeniable gold seal of the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I stopped inches from Marcus. He was sweating profusely, his eyes darting toward the exits like a cornered rat. "Hello, Marcus," I said. The microphone clipped to Julian's lapel picked up my voice, broadcasting my words crystal clear across the silent room. "You gave a beautiful presentation. It is truly remarkable how fluently you can describe lines of code you never actually wrote." Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but only a pathetic, strangled sound came out. I held up the stack of documents for the entire room to see, making sure the press photographers caught the official government seals flashing under the lights. I am standing here tonight not as a guest, but as the sole legally registered owner of the Washington Medical AI software. This is a formal federal cease and desist order, Marcus. You are being served on live camera. I slapped the heavy stack of legal papers directly into his chest. He reflexively grabbed them, staring down at the bold, unforgiving print as if the pages were actively burning his hands. Behind me, I continued gesturing to the massive digital screens that had just been displaying his fake victory. On cue, Julian's security team hijacked the audiovisual feed. Marcus's sleek promotional videos vanished. In their place, highly detailed, undeniable evidence flooded the screens. These are the original source code registrations. You will notice the timestamps. They are dated 3 years ago, registered exclusively under my name, matching the exact server logs from my personal computer. The exact same computer you stole from my home. A collective gasp ripped through the audience. Flashbulbs erupted in a blinding, chaotic frenzy. Reporters shouted questions, instantly smelling the blood in the water. I pointed directly at the screens, my voice ringing with absolute authority. Every single algorithm, every predictive model, every line of data you just claimed as your own genius was built by me during my night shifts at the hospital. You did not write this software, Marcus. You stole it. And you used embezzled funds from your mother's corporate accounts to finance this pathetic, fraudulent spectacle. Evelyn let out a sharp, hysterical shriek from the front row. She tried to stand up, but her legs gave out entirely, and she collapsed back into her chair, shielding her face from the aggressive barrage of camera flashes with her designer clutch. Chloe was openly sobbing on stage, her hands over her mouth, desperately trying to inch away from Marcus as if his proximity was physically toxic. Marcus turned his desperate, terrified eyes to Julian. "Julian, please, this is a lie. She is crazy." We have a contract. The $10 million is in escrow. You promised. Julian Sterling stepped forward. He reached into the inner pocket of his midnight blue tuxedo and slowly withdrew the ceremonial $10 million check. The heavy paper represented Marcus's entire fake empire. Julian did not look angry. He looked entirely bored, which was somehow infinitely more terrifying. We do indeed have a contract, Marcus Julian said, his deep voice slicing through the rising chaos of the ballroom. A contract with a very specific, very lethal collateral clause regarding intellectual property theft. A clause you eagerly signed guaranteeing you owned this software free and clear under penalty of perjury. Julian gripped the edges of the $10 million check. With a single sharp motion, he tore the heavy paper completely in half. Marcus let out a strangled cry, reaching out as if he could magically fuse the torn pieces back together. Julian tore the paper again, letting the confetti flutter down onto the stage floor, right onto Marcus's expensive leather shoes. The funding is officially revoked, Julian announced into the microphone. Furthermore, by violating the collateral clause of our investment agreement, you have triggered the extreme punitive damages penalty. You now personally owe Sterling Capital exactly $5 million in immediate penalty fees. Your marital assets, your bank accounts, and everything you and your new wife claim to own are currently being frozen by my legal team as we speak. Absolute unprecedented chaos erupted inside the Georgia Aquarium. Reporters rushed the stage, aggressively shoving their microphones forward and shouting over each other. Security guards swarmed the front row as furious investors began demanding answers. Marcus fell to his knees on the polished stage floor, surrounded by the torn pieces of his fake wealth, staring blankly at the cease and desist order in his trembling hands. His empire had not just crumbled, it had been entirely vaporized on live television. I stood next to Julian, looking down at the man who had tried to destroy me. I felt no pity. I felt absolutely nothing but the cold, satisfying weight of total victory. Marcus scrambled forward on his knees, his expensive suit pants sliding against the polished stage floor. He reached out with violently shaking hands, desperately trying to grab the hem of Julian Sterling's tailored midnight blue jacket. "Julian, please, you cannot do this," Marcus begged, his voice cracking thick with absolute unadulterated panic. "Give me 24 hours. I will rewrite the code. I will build you a new proprietary algorithm from scratch. I am a genius, you know I am. You cannot just leave me with a $5 million penalty. I do not have that kind of money. My company will be completely liquidated." Julian stepped back, his expression radiating pure, freezing disgust, as if Marcus were a diseased insect that had just crawled out of a storm drain. "You do not have anything," Marcus Julian stated, his voice a lethal current that carried effortlessly across the silent, stunned ballroom. "You are an empty, pathetic shell of a man who tried to sell me another woman's brilliant mind. You signed a binding federal document swearing you owned that intellectual property. Do not ever approach me again. My legal team will strip you down to the studs by tomorrow morning. You will be entirely bankrupt before the sun rises." A shrill, hysterical scream ripped through the heavy silence of the Georgia Aquarium. Chloe lunged across the stage, her expensive designer heels clicking frantically against the wood. She grabbed Marcus by the lapels of his rented tuxedo, violently shaking him. $5 million! Chloe shrieked, her carefully constructed facade completely obliterating into raw, animalistic terror. "You told me we were rich. You told me the intellectual property was completely secure and that you built it yourself. We do not have a prenuptial agreement, Marcus. That monster is going to seize my assets. You ruined my life. You lied to me about everything. I am legally tied to your massive debt." Marcus tried to push her away, stammering pathetic, incoherent excuses, but Chloe was relentless, her perfectly manicured nails digging deep into his jacket. The Atlanta press corps captured every single second of the spectacular domestic implosion camera shutters, firing like machine guns. The brilliant tech visionary and his flawless new bride were currently wrestling on stage like feral animals, tearing each other apart for the evening news. I stood watching them destroy each other, feeling a profound, terrifying calm. The first domino had fallen, crushing Marcus and Chloe beneath its immense weight. But I was not finished. The true architect of this entire nightmare was still sitting in the front row wrapped in stolen diamonds. I turned my back on the pathetic scene behind me and stepped directly to the very edge of the stage. The heavy stage spotlights followed my movement, casting a long shadow over the front row. I looked down into the audience, locking my eyes directly onto Evelyn Washington. Evelyn was rigidly glued to her plush velvet chair. The prominent state senator sitting next to her had already physically edged away, terrified of being photographed near the epicenter of a massive, unfolding fraud scandal. Evelyn's heavy diamond necklace sparkled under the harsh lights, but her face was the color of wet ash. She tried to lift her chin desperately, attempting to project her usual aristocratic superiority, but her lower lip was visibly trembling. "Did you really think I would stop at Marcus?" I asked into the microphone, my voice echoing off the high, cavernous ceiling of the ballroom. "Did you genuinely believe you could steal my life savings illegally? Throw me onto the street and simply resume your position in high society as if nothing happened?" Evelyn gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles turning bone white. "I do not know what you are talking about." She snapped, her voice wavering, pitching high and defensive. "You are a deranged, bitter woman trying to ruin my son's success. Security needs to remove you immediately. I will have you arrested for public defamation." I smiled, shaking my head slowly. "You always were overly confident in your own lies, Evelyn, but financial ledgers do not lie." I reached into the leather folder I was carrying and pulled out a thick stack of printed bank statements. I held them up high, ensuring the press photographers caught the official banking logos flashing under the lights. "This extravagant gala is truly breathtaking," I announced to the crowd, gesturing widely around the room, at the crystal chandeliers, the imported orchids, and the massive viewing tanks filled with whale sharks. "I imagine an event like this at the Georgia Aquarium, complete with beluga caviar and unlimited vintage champagne, costs a small fortune. In fact, it costs exactly $150,000 just to secure the grand ballroom and the elite event planners." A low, collective murmur rippled through the wealthy audience. Evelyn's eyes widened in sheer, unrestrained panic. She tried to stand up, but her legs refused to cooperate. "I have the bank records right here," I continued, my voice slicing effortlessly through the whispers. 2 weeks ago, Evelyn Washington authorized a direct wire transfer of $150,000 to the premier event planning agency managing tonight's launch party. But that money did not come from her corporate accounts. It did not come from her personal savings. It came directly from a private escrow account bearing my name. Evelyn finally leaped to her feet. "Shut off the microphone," she screamed at the bewildered audiovisual technicians standing by the mixing boards. "Someone remove her from the stage right now." No one moved. The security guards stood completely still, having already been explicitly ordered by Julian Sterling to let me speak. "You see, Evelyn has been systematically embezzling funds from her corporate clients for years," I explained, making sure to enunciate every single word for the rolling cameras. "When Marcus needed expensive servers to host my stolen software, she stole my money to pay for them. When they needed a luxury hotel suite to pretend they were wealthy, she drained my accounts again. And when they decided to throw this massive, spiteful celebration just to rub their fake success in my face, she made one final fatal mistake." Evelyn backed away from her chair, blindly bumping into a waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses. The crystals shattered on the polished floor, the sound ringing out like a gunshot. "You wired those stolen funds from a bank in Georgia to the event planner's corporate headquarters located in Miami, Florida," I stated, dropping my voice to a lethal, quiet register that commanded total silence. Evelyn froze completely. The realization hit her eyes, widening them in absolute paralyzing terror. "You crossed state lines with stolen money, Evelyn." I kept my gaze locked intensely on hers. "That is not just simple local theft. That is interstate wire fraud. And unlike local civil disputes, wire fraud is a severe federal crime." Right on cue, the massive oak double doors at the rear of the grand ballroom violently swung open, crashing loudly against the walls. The heavy thud echoed through the silent room. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. 2 men and 1 woman wearing dark suits and tactical windbreakers strode rapidly into the ballroom. The bright yellow letters FBI were printed boldly across their backs. They moved with swift, terrifying efficiency, marching straight down the center aisle, directly toward the front row. Evelyn let out a horrific, guttural gasp. She spun around, desperately looking for an exit, but she was completely boxed in by reporters, politicians, and the federal agents rapidly closing the distance. She looked toward her high society friends, silently begging for intervention, but every single one of them turned their backs, refusing to make eye contact with a criminal. Evelyn Washington, the lead agent, announced, his voice booming with unquestionable absolute authority. "You are under arrest for interstate wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and money laundering." "No, you cannot do this," Evelyn shrieked, her carefully styled hair falling wildly into her face as she backed into the shattered glass. "I am a respected member of this community. Do you know who I am? I am Evelyn Washington." The agent grabbed her arm swiftly and forcefully spinning her around. The sharp metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs ratcheting securely around her wrists echoed through the room. The sound was deeply, profoundly satisfying. "You have the right to remain silent," the agent recited firmly, escorting her forward as she began to sob hysterically. Atlanta's highest society watched in breathless, stunned horror as the untouchable, arrogant matriarch was frog-marched back down the exact same red carpet she had so proudly walked just an hour before. Evelyn was crying hysterically, the flashing camera bulbs capturing every single agonizing second of her absolute public ruin. On stage, Marcus was still on his knees, weeping pathetically into his hands. Chloe was hyperventilating against the digital screen, realizing she was chained to a ghost. I stood at the podium under the bright lights, breathing in the crisp, cool air of total vindication. The empire of lies was officially dead, and I was the one holding the match. The heavy oak doors of the grand ballroom swung shut, cutting off Evelyn's hysterical, fading wails, but the silence that followed inside the room was even more deafening. The flashing strobes of the press cameras momentarily slowed, shifting their relentless focus back to the spectacular wreckage remaining on the main stage. The high society guests, the venture capitalists, and the politicians who had been so eager to drink Marcus's expensive champagne just moments ago were now whispering furiously, physically stepping back from the stage as if his failure were a highly contagious disease. Marcus remained firmly planted on his knees, his shoulders shaking violently as he wept pathetically into his hands. The torn halves of Julian's $10 million check lay scattered around his knees like worthless confetti. The cease and desist order rested heavily against his expensive Italian leather shoes. He had spent his entire adult life coasting on his mother's stolen money and my stolen brilliance, and now stripped of both, there was absolutely nothing left. He was a hollow, empty shell collapsing under the weight of his own monumental hubris. Against the massive digital viewing screen, Chloe finally stopped hyperventilating. Her shallow, panicked breaths transformed into something much sharper, much more dangerous. The pure, animalistic terror in her eyes hardened into a violent, blinding rage. She stared down at the pathetic, sobbing man kneeling on the floor, the man she had viciously betrayed me to marry just weeks ago. She had calculated the odds, weighed the risks, and decided that aligning herself with Marcus was her golden ticket to the absolute pinnacle of Atlanta's elite. Now she realized with bone-chilling clarity that she had anchored herself to an anvil, and she was about to drown in a $5 million ocean of federal debt. Chloe pushed herself away from the screen, her designer gown shimmering under the stage lights, as she marched directly toward him. "Marcus, get up," Chloe hissed, her voice vibrating with absolute venom. "Get up right now." Marcus slowly lowered his hands, looking up at his new wife with red, swollen eyes. "Chloe, please," he whimpered, reaching out a trembling hand toward her. "We can fix this. I can call my mother's lawyers. I can figure out a way to restructure the debt. You just have to stand by me. We are a team." "A team," Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing harshly across the cavernous room, completely abandoning any remaining shred of her perfectly manicured socialite persona. "Your mother is in the back of a federal squad car. You do not own the software you sold me on. You lied to me about your wealth, you lied about your company, and you lied about your genius. You are an absolute fraud, Marcus." She looked down at her left hand. The massive, flawless diamond engagement ring and the diamond-encrusted wedding band caught the glare of the spotlights. They were symbols of a luxurious future she was suddenly realizing had been financed entirely by stolen money. With a jagged, furious breath, she violently yanked the rings off her finger. "I want an annulment," she screamed, her voice cracking with pure, unrestrained fury. "I am filing the paperwork tomorrow morning. I will not let you drag me down into federal prison or bankruptcy court. You ruined my entire life." Chloe hurled the heavy diamond rings directly at his face. They struck Marcus hard in the chest, bouncing off his lapel and clattering loudly onto the polished concrete floor, rolling away into the dark shadows of the stage. Marcus let out a devastated, strangled cry. He lunged forward desperately, trying to grab Chloe's ankle completely, humiliating himself in front of the entire press corps. "Chloe, wait. Do not leave me," he begged, his voice cracking into a high, pathetic whine. "Please, I love you." Chloe kicked his hand away with absolute disgust, her sharp heel catching his wrist. "Do not ever touch me again," she spat. She turned her back on her weeping husband, gathered the heavy fabric of her expensive gown, and stormed off the side of the stage, shoving her way past a bewildered event manager. The cameras tracked her every move, documenting the spectacular, brutal end of their fraudulent fairy tale. I watched the entire pathetic display from my position at the podium. I felt a profound, settling calm wash over my entire body. I had spent months enduring their cruelty, their taunts, and their arrogant certainty that they had utterly destroyed me. Now they had done the job for me, destroying themselves and each other on the largest, most public stage possible. I leaned into the microphone one last time. The sharp rustle of the movement immediately silenced the murmuring crowd. Every eye in the room snapped back to me. "You made your bed, Marcus," I said, my voice ringing out with absolute chilling finality. "Chloe, you fought hard for a seat at his table. Enjoy the feast." I unclipped the heavy microphone from the podium stand and simply let it go. It hit the stage floor with a loud, resounding thud that echoed through the grand ballroom, signaling the definitive end of the Washington family empire. I turned away from the podium and walked toward the edge of the stage. Julian Sterling was standing there, his posture relaxed, a faint, deeply satisfied smile playing on his lips. He extended his hand toward me. I reached out and firmly grasped it. His grip was warm and solid, a grounding anchor after the chaotic storm of the evening. Together we walked down the stage stairs and stepped back onto the main floor. The crowd of wealthy investors, socialites, and politicians instantly parted, clearing a wide, respectful path for us. They looked at me with a mixture of profound awe and genuine healthy fear. No one spoke. No one dared to block our exit. They simply watched as the rightful owner of Washington Medical AI walked out of the room with the most powerful venture capitalist in the city. Behind us, Marcus remained completely alone in the center of the massive empty stage. He was entirely bankrupt, publicly humiliated, facing a devastating $5 million lawsuit from a ruthless billionaire, and watching his mother head straight to a federal penitentiary. His wife had abandoned him on live television, leaving him kneeling in the shattered wreckage of his own pathological lies. There was no one left to steal from, no one left to manipulate, and nowhere left to hide. Julian and I walked through the grand lobby of the aquarium and pushed open the heavy glass doors, stepping out into the cool, humid Atlanta night. The chaotic flashing of camera bulbs and the shouting of reporters were sealed securely behind us. I stopped on the pavement, closing my eyes and taking a long, deep breath of the crisp night air. For the first time in 5 grueling, agonizing years, I did not feel the crushing, suffocating weight of Marcus's manipulation pressing down on my chest. My lungs expanded fully. My mind was entirely my own. The intellectual property I had bled for was finally legally secure in my hands. The battle was completely over, and I was entirely free. The empire of lies was officially dead, and I was the one holding the match. The weeks that followed moved with the ruthless, thrilling efficiency of a falling guillotine. Marcus's highly publicized, spectacular downfall utterly dominated the Atlanta news cycle. Sterling Capital's elite legal team descended upon Washington Medical AI like a pack of starving wolves. They executed the punitive damages clause with surgical precision, liquidating every single asset, freezing every fraudulent bank account, and immediately seizing the luxury leased vehicles Marcus had paraded around town. He was left with absolutely nothing. Evicted from his high-rise penthouse, Marcus was forced to move into a cheap, cramped motel on the industrial outskirts of the city. He spent his days hiding behind drawn curtains, desperately dodging relentless phone calls from furious creditors and aggressive process servers. His tech visionary persona had been completely incinerated, leaving behind an exposed bankrupt fraud. Chloe fared no better in the blast radius. Desperate to salvage her shattered social standing and distance herself from the radioactive wreckage of her brief marriage, she attempted to slink back into her old circles at the Buckhead Country Club. She showed up to a charity luncheon wearing her last season's Chanel suit, armed with practiced trembling tears and a meticulously rehearsed sob story about being an innocent, deceived victim. The wealthy elite she had so desperately tried to impress did not offer her a seat. The matriarchs of Atlanta society simply looked her up and down with freezing, unadulterated disgust. They laughed openly in her face, loudly whispering about the desperate gold digger who had hitched her wagon to a $5 million anchor of federal debt. Chloe was forcefully escorted off the private country club property by security permanently shunned by the very society she had sold her soul to join. Evelyn's descent was the most severe and permanent of all. Faced with an insurmountable mountain of irrefutable bank records, fraudulent wire transfers, and Julian's pristine audiovisual evidence from the gala, her high-priced defense attorney bluntly advised her to surrender. There was no charm or manipulation that could save her from federal prosecution. Standing before a stern federal judge in a cold, sterile courtroom, stripped of her diamond necklaces and designer silk, Evelyn Washington formally pleaded guilty to interstate wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and money laundering. There was no arrogant smirk left on her face. Her shoulders shook as the judge slammed the heavy wooden gavel down, sentencing her to 8 years in a federal penitentiary. The woman who had ruthlessly mocked my hospital scrubs and orchestrated my financial ruin was now permanently mandated to wear a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. While my former abusers rotted in their self-made prisons, my life accelerated into a brilliant, unhindered future. Julian Sterling did not just tear up Marcus's fraudulent contract, he drew up a new, entirely legitimate one for the rightful owner. Sitting across from Julian in the sleek, glass-walled boardroom of Sterling Capital, I read over the paperwork. Julian treated me with absolute professional reverence, recognizing me not as a pawn, but as a brilliant equal. I signed a massive exclusive licensing agreement for my medical AI software. Julian did not offer me a ceremonial fake check for the cameras. He offered me a staggering multi-million-dollar upfront payout, complete with total creative control and a permanent seat on his medical advisory board. When the monumental wire transfer officially hit my secure independent bank account, I did not buy a sports car or a gaudy mansion. I finally had the power and the capital to execute the true vision that had kept me awake during all those grueling, heartbreaking night shifts in the hospital. I funneled the Sterling capital directly into the heart of downtown Atlanta. I purchased an abandoned, sprawling commercial brick building and entirely gutted it. Over the next 6 months, I transformed the decaying space into a state-of-the-art, fully funded pediatric clinic. This was not a superficial vanity project built for high society applause. This was a sanctuary designed specifically for underprivileged children. I equipped the facility with the absolute latest diagnostic technology, integrating the very AI software that had started this entire war to ensure these kids received the fastest, most accurate care possible. I hired the best, most dedicated pediatricians, nurses, and specialists I had worked with over the years, paying them the premium salaries they actually deserved. The grand opening of the Washington Children's Clinic took place on a crisp, bright Tuesday morning. There were no rented velvet ropes, no beluga caviar, and no pretentious billionaires seeking a tax write-off. Instead, the street was filled with local families, laughing children, community leaders, and genuine medical professionals who deeply respected my work. I stood on the front steps wearing a simple, sharp white blazer, holding a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors. The bright red ribbon stretched across the front doors represented everything I had fought for: my financial independence, my intellectual property, and my unwavering refusal to be erased by toxic people. I smiled broadly at the cheering crowd, raising the scissors high. As I scanned the sea of genuinely happy, supportive faces, my eyes caught a familiar, imposing figure standing quietly at the very back of the crowd. Julian Sterling leaned casually against a sleek black town car, keeping his distance from the local press cameras. He was not wearing a tuxedo today, just a sharp, understated charcoal suit, his arms crossed casually over his chest. He did not step forward to steal the spotlight or claim public credit for the clinic's funding. He simply stood there in the morning light, watching me with a look of profound, undeniable admiration and deep respect. I locked eyes with him and offered a genuine, silent smile of gratitude. I turned back to the clinic, the physical manifestation of my hard-won freedom, and sliced the red ribbon in half. The crowd erupted into joyous applause. I stepped through the front doors into the cool, clean air of my own hospital, breathing freely for the first time in years. The ultimate lesson from this story is that true worth is never defined by those who betray you, even family. When toxic relatives treat you as a scapegoat, sacrificing your well-being for their comfort, the most powerful response is not seeking validation, but walking away to build an empire. True security comes from financial independence, firm boundaries, and unyielding self-respect. Blood does not excuse abuse. Ultimately, your greatest triumph lies in turning their underestimation into fuel rising from the ashes of betrayal and choosing genuine love. Please share your story of overcoming family toxicity in the comments section down below.